These are the most shocking, drug-fueled NBA nightmares that you won't believe. And we're starting with Willie Cauley-Stein, a name you probably haven't heard in a while. Back in 2015, the Sacramento Kings used their 6th overall pick to draft the 7-foot big man from Kentucky. Most fans remember Willie as a defensive stopper alongside college stars like Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns. But when he entered the NBA, his career didn't exactly take off. In fact, it completely unraveled in ways nobody saw coming. Sure, the Kings have a history of poor decisions, and drafting Cauley-Stein, who averaged just 9 points and 6 rebounds, fit that bill. He was supposed to be the perfect pairing with DeMarcus Cousins, a defense-first big to complement Boogie's offense. But instead, he quickly faded into obscurity, bouncing from team to team while struggling to find his footing. On the surface, it looked like just another underwhelming NBA journey. But what unfolded behind the scenes was a real-life horror story. After his stint with the Kings, Willie signed a contract with the Golden State Warriors. It was the perfect opportunity, a team in need of a rim-running center, a chance to revive his career. But his play never matched the hype. He was eventually traded to the Dallas Mavericks, where things only got worse. His minutes dropped. His production fell off a cliff. It looked like a confidence issue, but the truth was much darker. Willie was spiraling into a world of drug addiction. Shortly after leaving Sacramento, tragedy struck. 3 of his childhood friends were shot, 1 fatally. Then, while still trying to process the trauma, his grandmother, the woman who raised him, was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer. Willie turned to pills to numb the pain. He began popping bootleg Percocets, escalating his usage even as he was expecting a child. He later admitted he was taking fistfuls of pills daily to cope. While his grandmother was withering away, he hid from reality, drowning himself in opioids. On the court, he was a shell of himself, playing without passion, without energy. Off the court, he was a walking zombie. I had no energy, no love, no personality. The drugs took everything from me, he confessed. Eventually, he hit rock bottom. His performance dipped to under 2 points per game. He couldn't even bring himself to say goodbye to the woman who raised him. He missed her final moments, lost in addiction, numbed by fentanyl-laced pills. And yes, fentanyl, the synthetic. Opioid 100 times stronger than morphine. He didn't even know what he was taking until he entered rehab. According to doctors, he had been playing NBA games while high on fentanyl, the same drug killing over 50,000 Americans a year. Most fake pills laced with it contain enough to kill a grown man. Willie's massive frame and tolerance may have saved him, but barely. Rehab gave him a second chance. For once, he wasn't an NBA player, a millionaire, or a celebrity. He was just another guy fighting for his life, and by some miracle, he made it out. Willie eventually took his career overseas, hoping to find peace and rebuild. His story could have ended in tragedy, but somehow he escaped. Not everyone was so lucky, because the next story is one of the darkest in NBA history, the tragic downfall of Eddie Griffin. Griffin was a phenom, a 6'10" forward with a silky jumper and elite shot-blocking ability. He could stretch the floor and dominate the paint, a rare combo back in the early 2000s. But behind the highlights was a deeply troubled young man. Born and raised in Philadelphia, Griffin never had a strong father figure, and that void haunted him. He was emotionally unstable, volatile, and prone to violent outbursts. He was expelled from high school after a fight with a teammate, but his talent was undeniable. Seton Hall gave him a shot, and he exploded onto the scene. 18 points, 11 boards, and 4.4 blocks a game as a freshman. But off the court, he was unraveling. He punched another teammate during practice, splitting his lip. He was grieving the death of his older brother, and drugs became his escape. Despite the red flags, Griffin was drafted 7th overall in 2001 by the Nets, who immediately traded him to Houston for 3 first-round picks. The Rockets thought they had found a unicorn, but his career was short-lived. He averaged just 9 points and 6 rebounds his rookie season. His shooting was terrible. His effort was inconsistent, and his off-court life was a mess. In 2003, he was arrested for marijuana possession, and later that same year, he was charged with assault for allegedly punching a woman multiple times during an argument. By his 3rd season, he was completely out of control. He missed the entire 2003-04 campaign to deal with alcohol abuse, and the Rockets let him go. The Timberwolves gave him one more shot, hoping that Kevin Garnett's leadership could keep him grounded. For a while, it worked. He showed flashes, protecting the rim, hitting outside shots. But the demons returned. He crashed his car while allegedly watching adult content on a portable DVD player. Witnesses said he was drunk, disoriented, and begging the other driver not to call the cops. He walked into a store and bought more alcohol right after the crash. Minnesota released him in 2007. He was just 24, and then came the tragic ending. On August 17, 2007, Griffin drove his SUV through a railroad barrier in Houston, straight into an oncoming freight train. The car exploded. His body was so badly burned that he could only be identified through dental records. His blood alcohol level was 26, more than 3 times the legal limit. Eddie Griffin was just 25 years old. He left behind a 3-year-old daughter, now fatherless, just like he had been. But if you think that's where the NBA's drug-related chaos ends, think again. Let's rewind to 1987 and take a look at one of the biggest drug scandals in NBA history, the Phoenix Suns cocaine conspiracy. Back in the 80s, drugs were everywhere in the league. Len Bias, the 2nd pick in the 1986 draft, died from a cocaine overdose just 2 days after being selected. The NBA was on high alert, and players were offered a deal. Admit your drug use and get help, or face a lifetime ban. Walter Davis, a Suns star, checked himself into rehab in 1985, a move that would later have huge implications. In early 1987, things got weird. Center James Edwards, injured at the time, was seen partying in Phoenix nightclubs with other players, including 2 from the Milwaukee Bucks. One night, he reportedly told a club manager that the upcoming Suns-Bucks game wouldn't exceed 226 points. The game ended with just 222. A coincidence? Maybe, but suspicions grew. The Suns began to collapse. Their coach was fired. The team looked disjointed. And on April 17th, the day before the season ended, Arizona law enforcement dropped a bombshell. 13 people indicted in a massive cocaine trafficking conspiracy. Among them were current Suns players James Edwards, Jay Humphries, and Grant Gondrazik investigators tied the players to a pair of local cocaine dealers, the Leisure Brothers, who had been supplying drugs to players since the late 70s. The list of implicated players ballooned to 17, including current, former, and even opposing team members. Walter Davis, who had once checked into rehab, gave up the names in exchange for immunity. Bartenders were wired up. Secret recordings were made. One included a manager admitting to supplying Davis with cocaine and betting on that suspicious Suns-Bucks game. But due to legal technicalities, the recordings were never used in court. Still, the damage was done. One key witness, Johnny High, died in a DUI crash later that year. Gondrazik was out of the league shortly after. Nick Vanos, another Suns player, tragically died in a plane crash. And Walter Davis? He never reached the same heights again. The Suns scandal rocked the NBA to its core. It showed just how deep the drug problem ran, and how close the league came to collapse under the weight of its own demons. Richard Dumas could have gone down as one of the great what-ifs in NBA history, a player destined to thrive on a championship-caliber team. But instead, he became another heartbreaking cautionary tale, a gifted talent lost to addiction. Dumas' story isn't just about basketball. It's about a lifelong battle with substance abuse that started horrifyingly early and never let go. Shockingly, his struggles didn't begin in high school or even middle school. They began at the unthinkable age of 5. With a young son full of energy and struggling with ADHD, his father made a devastating choice. He gave Richard beer to calm him down. That moment would shape the rest of his life. By 13, Dumas had already moved on to cigarettes, marijuana, hard liquor, and painkillers. Most kids that age were barely experimenting, if at all. But Dumas was already deeply hooked, relying on substances just to function. What made it all the more tragic was that none of it seemed to affect his basketball skills. At least, not yet. He was dominating on the court, so nobody intervened. Coaches and adults looked the other way. In high school, he was a star in Oklahoma, winning 4 state titles and averaging over 20 points per game. But behind the numbers was a teenager who literally couldn't play unless he had a few beers beforehand. The pressure of packed gyms triggered his anxiety, and alcohol became his coping mechanism. This wasn't just a bad habit, it was a full-on dependency. Dumas had multiple offers from major colleges but chose to stay close to home and play for Oklahoma State. It was also around this time that he made a decision that would completely derail his life. He took one hit from a laced joint, crack, cocaine, and that was all it took. He was hooked instantly. And because he stayed local, his access to drugs was unlimited. Though he averaged 17 points and 6 rebounds as a freshman, his numbers declined each season as his addiction deepened. His issues weren't a secret. Teammates and coaches knew what was going on. Eventually, Oklahoma State could no longer ignore it. After multiple violations, he was dismissed from the team, effectively ending his college career. With the NBA dream slipping away, Dumas went overseas to Israel. The culture shock and distance from his usual surroundings actually helped. He cleaned up, at least enough to put up impressive numbers: 21 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and an eye-popping 59% shooting. Scouts started paying attention again. He declared for the 1991 NBA draft and was picked 46th overall by the Phoenix Suns. At first, it seemed like the gamble would pay off. But before playing a single NBA game, Dumas failed a drug test. He was suspended for the entire 1991-92 season. He returned overseas to play and eventually enrolled in John Lucas's renowned rehab program. When he finally debuted for the Suns in the 1992-93 season, he looked every bit the star they hoped for, averaging 16 points and 5 rebounds, playing lockdown defense, and helping lead the team to the NBA Finals against Michael Jordan's Bulls. On basketball's biggest stage, he held his own, averaging 16 a night. It seemed like Dumas had finally turned a corner, but that hope would soon be crushed. During the off-season, he traveled to Hawaii for an autograph signing. While there, someone offered him crack. One hit led to another, and soon he was back in the spiral. By the end of the trip, he was cooking drugs with strangers and ended up stranded, until the Suns had to intervene and bring him back home. Back in rehab, he tried to regroup and returned for the 1994 season. But something had changed. The NBA, aware of his issues, began cracking down. He could no longer sneak in his usual six-pack before games. Without his crutches, his game fell apart. He appeared in only 15 games before being waived. The Philadelphia 76ers offered him a final chance, but the magic was gone. In 20 minutes a game, he barely averaged 6 points. By 26, Dumas was out of the NBA. What followed was a tragic collapse. In 1997, he was arrested in Arizona on drug charges. In 2013, he was caught stealing thousands of dollars in merchandise from retail stores. This was a man who once played on basketball's biggest stage, now reduced to petty crime, struggling to survive. Dumas' story is gut-wrenching. A kid exposed to addiction before he even had a chance at childhood, who could never fully escape the demons that haunted him. And sadly, his tale wasn't isolated. At the end of the 1980s, the Houston Rockets looked like they were on the verge of a dynasty. With Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson anchoring the front court, they had a near-perfect mix of size, skill, and athleticism. After reaching the NBA Finals in 1986, the future seemed unstoppable. But every contender needs its supporting cast. And for the Rockets, that came in the form of backcourt duo Lewis Lloyd and Mitchell Wiggins. They weren't just complementary pieces, they were essential. Lloyd was a smooth scorer, putting up 17 points per game. Wiggins added 11, giving the Rockets critical outside shooting and energy. On the court, they competed ferociously. Off the court, they were inseparable, more like brothers than teammates. But away from the hardwood, they were chasing another kind of high. Houston in the 80s had a wild nightlife, and the two guards dove headfirst into it, rubbing shoulders with celebrities, club hopping, and slipping deeper into the wrong crowd. Their bond revolved around basketball by day, partying by night. Then came the night that changed everything. 32 games into the 1986-87 season, the Rockets were poised for another deep playoff run. But after a long night out, Lloyd and Wiggins were approached by a stranger outside a club. He claimed to have the best product in the city and offered them a hit. Whether it was curiosity, addiction, or poor judgment, they accepted. The next morning, it was all over. The NBA received an anonymous tip. Both players were tested, and both tested positive for cocaine. The news shocked the basketball world. Commissioner David Stern, determined to clean up the league's image, made an example of them. Despite it being their first offense, he issued lifetime bans to both players. Just like that, 2 careers were gone, and so was the Rockets' dynasty. Ralph Sampson's body broke down shortly after. Hakeem was left to carry the franchise alone. The Rockets wouldn't sniff contention again for years. Wiggins eventually clawed his way back to the league after being reinstated, but he was never the same. Lloyd never returned at all. Looking back, they weren't just victims of bad decisions. They were casualties of an entire era. The NBA's cocaine crisis claimed countless talents. Stern's tough stance helped clean up the league, but it came at a steep cost. For Lloyd and Wiggins, it was the cost of their careers. For the Rockets, it was the cost of a potential dynasty. These stories are more than just cautionary tales. They're a glimpse into the darker side of professional sports, where fame, pressure, and personal pain collide. And for every Willie Cauley-Stein who makes it out alive, there's an Eddie Griffin who doesn't.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see more exciting content, stay tuned for upcoming videos and don't miss out on the latest updates. Hit that subscribe button and join the community for more videos. Thanks for watching.